Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, hope you all had a great weekend, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. So what's been going on this week? Well, quite a bit actually. Recently we shared the news that game developers were getting mad because Baldur's Gate 3 had... I still can't believe this is true, but because Baldur's Gate 3 was setting unrealistically high standards that other game developers couldn't possibly hope to match because, it just kind of worked and was good. Unsurprisingly, nobody had any sympathy for them. When most game developers, they can't get the game working out of the gate. And yet somehow the cache store always seems to work perfectly well and has regular updates. So, yeah, cry me a river, said everybody. However, this week there is some news about game developers getting really mad, and you can kind of sympathise with them a lot, and it's to do with the game engine Unity. Now, maybe you haven't heard the news. Maybe you don't even know what Unity is, so allow me to quickly explain. Unity is basically a game development engine, and it's really popular because it's simple and affordable, and basically anybody can use it. Unity's been the game engine that's powered some of the most popular indie games of recent memory. Games like Subnautica, Vampire Survivors, Pokemon Go, Ringworld, and the upcoming classified France 44. Now, Unity itself hasn't changed. It's still relatively simple to use, it's still relatively powerful and pretty adaptable. But it's no longer quite as affordable as it used to be. Unity just announced some changes to its pricing plan. Previously, you would buy a license to use Unity, develop your game, publish your game, and any money that you made out of the sales of the game was yours. But what Unity are now expecting is that as soon as you've made your first $200,000, they expect you to hand over 20 cents for every install. Now that doesn't sound too bad. I mean, if you're charging $20 for your game and Unity has taken 20 cents, that's only 1%. And it's less if you're charging more for the game. And the obvious competition, like the Unreal Engine, for example, charges 5%. But it only charges 5% after you've made your first million, not your first 200,000. But even that's not the issue. You see, the major issue here isn't just that Unity are charging developers 20 cents for every install after they've crossed that $200,000 earnings threshold. They're charging 20 cents on every install, not just every install that you're ever going to have, but every install that you have ever had. They're basically changing the terms of the deal retrospectively. So, if you developed a game in Unity 10 years ago, and it's made more than $200,000, you owe Unity money. Subnautica is a perfect example here. The original Subnautica was released in 2018. It's a 5-year-old game and it still holds up today and it's still selling today. And when the developers bought the license to use Unity to develop that engine, there were no per install costs. And Subnautica did, and deservedly so, incredibly well. It's had more than 6 million copies sold. And Unity got paid for that when the developers licensed their game engine. And now they want to get paid again. 6 million copies, that's a lot of 20 cents. Understandably, game developers using the Unity engine are a little bit upset about all of this, as I'm sure you can completely understand. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, okay, it does kind of suck. I mean, this is a real scumbag move from Unity, but if you don't like the terms of using that particular game engine, then just use another game engine. And, well, yeah, that is an option, but it's not an option for everybody, because there are developers out there right now developing games in Unity. They bought a license to use the engine 3 years ago. So they're 3 years into a 5-year development cycle, and now Unity are saying, do you remember that deal we signed 3 years ago? Yeah, forget it. More money, please. And what are they going to do? I mean, you're 3 years into a 5-year development cycle. It's not like you can scrap everything that you've done for the last 3 years and start again from scratch. You're not Chris Roberts, right? you can't afford it. You're locked into that deal whether you like it or not. And most of them don't like it. Hang on, Jingles. Fact check. You said that Subnautica has 6 million installs. But the new pricing structure only takes effect from the 1st of January 2024, so that doesn't mean that with 6 million current installs, the developers of Subnautica now are going to owe Unity $1.2 million. No, that's true. But what is retrospective is the install threshold. See, as well as having earned your first $200,000 from any game that you publish using Unity, Unity are also saying you have to have a certain number of copies of the game installed on people's systems. So it's the $200,000 of the install threshold, whichever comes first, at which point, money please. And what's retrospective, what they're now backdating, is the number of installs, the install threshold. So if a game like Subnautica, again, it's a perfect example here because it was developed with Unity and it's had 6 million copies installed. It doesn't matter that the rules only come into effect on the 1st of January. It's not how many people install Subnautica after the 1st of January. It's with effect from the 1st of January how many people have ever installed Subnautica. And with, 6 million copies sold, I think they probably exceeded the threshold. So, money please. What a scumbag move. Oh, and it gets worse. Unity has told developers that they'll be charged for reinstalls of their games. So if you had Subnautica, played it, finished it, uninstalled it to make space on your hard drive, and then a couple of years later you thought, you know what? I fancy a bit of a blast from the past. I'm going to reinstall Subnautica and play it through again, but maybe do things a bit differently this time. Or maybe you were late to the party. Maybe you somehow managed to miss Subnautica. And I'm using Subnautica as an example here, but this applies to every single game that ever was or ever will be encoded using Unity. But maybe you were late to the party for Subnautica, you only started playing it recently, you're thoroughly enjoying it, and then you upgrade your hardware. You buy a new PC, and so you reinstall it on the new PC. In both of these cases, the developer gets charged twice. And Unity can't even get its own story straight. I mean, it's really, really difficult to nail them down as to the exact details of their new pricing plan, because they told one developer that this would be the case, that the developer would be charged for every install and reinstall. Which is bad, but at least the developers knew where they stood. I mean, they're standing in a big pile of shit, but at least they know they're standing in a big pile of shit. And then a couple of days later, a Unity employee went onto Twitter and said, actually, no, you're not going to be charged for reinstalls. And then a couple of days later, Unity said, actually, yes, you will be charged for reinstalls. It's just... I mean, the whole situation is just a big shit sandwich for game developers everywhere. But what is making it worse is the miscommunication from Unity themselves on the subject. I mean, it's reaching wargaming levels of incompetence, where developers, they don't actually know what's happening. They know it's bad, but they don't know how bad, because Unity are issuing contradictory statements, and so game developers now really appear to be getting most of their information on the pricing change not from Unity themselves, but from other game developers who have, third parties who have privately communicated with Unity, been told something, and are now relating what they have been told by Unity on social media. All of which has been leading to some unintentionally hilarious tweets like this one from game developer Josh Sawyer, where he says, I love that there's a stream of updates from third parties that are all like, I talked to Unity and they clarified that 1, the bad thing is even worse, 2, the less bad thing is the same amount of bad, and 3, there's a new secret third bad thing that's the worst thing you've ever heard. The amusing thing here, if anything about this can be said to be amusing, is that, I mean, this is really bad news for indie game developers. Let's make no mistake about that. But it's not just indie game developers who use Unity. Pokemon Go used Unity. Genshin Impact used Unity. Hearthstone used Unity. Do you think Blizzard Activision are suddenly going to start handing millions of dollars over to Unity just because Unity says so? They're Blizzard Activision. What are Unity going to do? Great news for Blizzard Activision, I suppose. They can just turn around to Unity and say, no, fuck off. because they're Blizzard Activision. Independent game developers don't have that kind of clout, though. There are other implications as well, of course. What about free weekends on Steam? You know, where the game's free to install for the weekend. Who's going to get charged for that? Do you think Steam? Do you think Valve are going to hand over money to Unity just because Unity says so? I don't think so. What about the Twitch Prime giveaways? Because, you know, if you have Twitch Prime, you get free games every month. Who's going to foot the bill for that? Amazon owns Twitch. Do you think Amazon are going to hand over money to Unity just because Unity says so? No, I don't think so. So who's paying for those? You can see why game developers are not happy about this entire situation. But I guess if there can be said to be a bright side here, it's that the line has now been drawn in the sand, right? Both Unity and the game developers who use Unity now know exactly where they stand. Except, no, they don't. Because after first saying that you would be charged for every install and reinstall, and then saying, no, actually you won't, and then saying, actually, yes, you will, just a couple of days ago, Unity have clarified their position yet again. They're now saying that you won't be charged for reinstalls, you also won't be charged for trial versions, so presumably we're talking about things like free weekends on Steam. You won't be charged for games that are streamed over the web, so all of those browser games that use the Unity engine. You also won't be charged for games that are installed as a result of purchasing a charity bundle. Still no clarification on exactly who's going to have to foot the bill for games that were given away free on Twitch, for example, because let's not forget, these are games that are given away for free. In all of these examples, the developer's not making any money from it, they're being given away for free. But Unity is still expecting their 20 cents. And then they weren't. And then they were again. And now they're not again. So, you know, thank you for clarifying that one, Unity. At least now everybody knows where they stand. Join us this time next week, where Unity backtrack for a 5th time. Because at this point, who the fuck can tell? One thing that you really do have to bear in mind about all of this is that none of this really should be remotely surprising when you consider who Unity's new CEO is. He goes by the name of John Riccitiello. Hope I've pronounced that right. Well, actually, I don't really care if I haven't. You may have heard of him because he was the guy who was in the shit last year for saying that game developers who didn't consider how to completely monetize every aspect of their game from the very start of development were, and I'm using his words here, fucking idiots. This is the CEO who in January of this year fired 300 of his employees right after saying that he was, and I'm quoting his exact words here, thrilled with the work that they'd done. And then a couple of months later, sacked another 600 of them in order to set the company up for future growth. Future growth, huh? Well, with every game developer capable of thinking and breathing at the same time, putting as much distance as they possibly can between themselves and your game engine, good luck with that. Might be time to start selling your shares in the company. Oh, hang on a minute. Ein Minuten bitte. That's exactly what he's been doing for the last 12 months. Selling off 50,000 of his shares in the company. It's almost like he knew the stock price was about to fall. You couldn't make this shit up. Right, anyway, that's enough about Unity. Starfield. Actually, this isn't so much about Starfield as it is about people's attitudes. One of my favourite subjects, right? So, some context here. Those of you who like to mod your games, particularly Bethesda games, are probably aware of a website called Nexus Mods. It's where I got all of my mods for Fallout 4 and Skyrim before that. They have recently announced a ban on a certain mod. To give you a bit of context here, when I did the Starfield video last week, I made a brief comment during the character creation process, where the game gave me the option, and it was just an option, nothing was forced on me. The game gave me the option to choose my pronouns, which I thought was kind of funny. That probably says more about me than it does about the game, but no big deal. Well, apparently, for some people, it was a big deal. I saw at least one comment that went something along the lines of, oh, I'm sick and tired of all this politically correct left-wing bullshit, that's it, I'm not buying this game. Well, I mean, you know, you do you. Nobody's forcing you to play anything. Just like nobody was forcing me to choose a pronoun, but I digress. Apparently, enough other people also had that opinion that a mod was released for Starfield that removed the option because it is just an option, I can't stress this enough, a mod was released that removed the option to change your pronouns. And Nexus mods have banned this mod. This is fucked up on so many different levels that I barely even know where to start. Although, my reaction really should be, who gives a shit? In fact, the reactions of everybody involved in this whole sorry saga should have been, who gives a shit? But apparently enough people gave a shit that this is now turned into a story. Here's the thing. First, it was an option. Nobody was forcing you to choose a pronoun. Secondly, even though I don't agree with it, I can kind of understand why people might get a bit upset if, during the course of their playthrough, they came across another character, got the pronouns wrong, and then unwittingly ended up being the star of a social media shitstorm as that guy who oppressed me one day when I was playing Starfield got my pronouns wrong. Clearly they're just part of the right-wing patriarchy, blah blah, yada yada yada. I mean, if that were the case, I could kind of understand why you'd be a bit annoyed, but that's not the case, is it? Starfield is not a multiplayer game. You are never, while playing Starfield, going to be put in the situation of desperately trying to guess what another person's pronouns are in order to avoid upsetting them, because you are never going to come across another player. It's a single-player game. So I could, during the character creation process in Starfield, identify as a fucking attack helicopter, if I so chose. And it wouldn't make the slightest bit of difference to you. Or at least it shouldn't make the slightest bit of difference to you. But apparently it's made enough difference to enough people that a mod was encoded and uploaded to Nexus Mods. Somebody went to the trouble of writing a mod to remove the option to choose pronouns, specifically for people who were never going to exercise the option to choose pronouns in the first place. And the fact that that mod had been created annoyed so many other people that Nexus Mods banned the mod. And at no stage during this process did anybody ask the one important question. The one question that everybody involved in this whole sorry story really should have stopped and asked themselves, and that question is, who gives a shit? It's like changing your relationship status on Facebook. I mean, the options are single, in a relationship, engaged, married, in a civil partnership, in a domestic partnership, in an open relationship, it's complicated, separated, divorced, or widowed. All of those choices, not one of them is my relationship status. What's your relationship status, Jingles? I will happily tell you. It's none of your fucking business. That's my relationship status, but it's not an option available on Facebook, and it's what everybody else's relationship status should be as far as I'm concerned too, as well as their pronouns. None of my fucking business. I firmly believe that most people are actually like me and just don't give a shit. But the narrative isn't dictated by the people who don't give a shit, is it? It's dictated by the people who do give a shit, and those people form minorities at both extreme ends of the spectrum. They're the ones talking about it, they're the ones making it an issue. It's like somebody comes out as gay. 10% of people think it's fantastic. Another 10% of people think that you should be put in a concentration camp. The vast majority, the other 80%, just don't fucking care. You're gay, that's great, but I'm making eggs here, I'm busy. Bother me some other time. I've often said, and it bears repeating, that I only really have one rule around here, and that's don't be a dick. But I think it's high time we introduce rule number 2. And rule number 2 is that more people really need to not give a shit about things that are none of their fucking business. And I think we need to start with the pronouns that people choose to apply to a collection of pixels in a single-player game. And on that bombshell, I can't say I'm looking forward to reading the comments in this week's episode, because unfortunately, not enough people don't give a shit about things that are none of their fucking business. But we'll see how it goes. I have every confidence in you all. But that is it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.